Joining us now is CBS News senior security contributor and former deputy director at the CIA, Michael Morell. Mike, let's start with what are the implications about this in terms of what we know about ISIS?
So I think there's two major points here, John. The first is that ISIS for the last year has been trying to build an attack capability in Western Europe. I think this is the first manifestation of that effort and that success. And eventually, they will try to build a similar attack capability in the United States. So I think that is the first fundamental point. The second fundamental point is in the last 2 weeks, we've had an ISIS affiliate in the Sinai, apparently, we don't know for sure yet, but apparently bring down an airliner, only the third airliner brought down by a bomb in the last quarter century. And we've had the second largest terrorist attack in Western Europe since 9/11, since the largest since Madrid in 2004. I think when you put those two things together, and you put together this attempt to build an attack capability in the West, I think it's now crystal clear to us that our strategy, our policy vis-a-vis ISIS is not working, and it's time to look at something else.
And then if you were briefing the president, that's what you'd tell him?
Yes.
And what would you tell him? What is the something else to look to?
So that's hard. This is a very complicated situation. But I do think the question of whether President Assad needs to go or whether he is part of the solution here, we need to look at again. You know, clearly he's part of the problem, but he may also be part of the solution, right? An agreement where he stays around for a while and the Syrian army, supported by the coalition, takes on ISIS may be the best result here, may give us the best result. I think we need to have that discussion again.
So the United States, Russia, Syria, all fighting against ISIS together.
Exactly.
That's what you're talking about.
Exactly.
Going back to this attack capability that you talked about, this was give me your sense of the sophistication of this attack and what we can tell from that.
Right. So it looks like, right, and we don't know for sure, but it looks like this was planned, organized, directed from Iraq and Syria. So that first, that point makes this complicated, right? Second is you're moving operatives around. You've got a large number of operatives. They have to get explosives. They have to get weapons. They have to communicate among themselves and communicate back to Iraq and Syria. That is a level of sophistication that we have not seen since the London bombings in 2005.
So these weren't kind of a bunch of lone wolves. These are people who have a connection to a headquarters.
It seems that way, yes.
And how does that communication take place?
So I think what we're going to learn, we don't know for sure yet, but I think what we're going to learn is that these guys are communicating via these encrypted apps, right? The commercial encryption, which is very difficult, if not impossible, for governments to break, and the producers of which don't produce the keys necessary for law enforcement to read the encrypted messages.
When we compare ISIS to Al-Qaeda, there used to be a distinction. Al-Qaeda had these big aims. ISIS was working on a caliphate. Well, now we're in a new situation here. How then does the command and control of Al-Qaeda, that people may be more familiar with, match up with what you were seeing emerge with ISIS?
So the difference between the two has, the largest difference between the two is who's going to be in charge, right? ISIS didn't want to fall under the leadership of Al-Qaeda. That's the biggest difference. The other more subtle difference was Al-Qaeda's view that we have to defeat the West and then get a caliphate. ISIS's view is let's get the caliphate and then defeat the West, right? So I think what we're now seeing is they have their caliphate. It is very much like a state in almost every respect, except they don't have any recognition in foreign relations, but it is very much like a state. So what you're actually seeing now is something akin to state-sponsored terrorism in the West by ISIS.
If there is a battle against, going back to this encryption, what would a step be in terms of legislation, or what kind of tools would be needed to combat this?
So we need to have a public debate about this, right? We have, in a sense, had a public debate. That debate was defined by Edward Snowden, right, and the concern about privacy. I think we're now going to have another debate about that. It's going to be defined by what happened in Paris.
All right, Michael Morell, you're going to stick with us. Thanks so much.